The 22nd day of July 2025, Liffey meets Scam 2. This is a follow-up on my earlier video with a bit more facts itemised. It's a dullish day here. And just before we start, I want to respond to some of the comments that were made there. My first mate says, Val, you should moderate your views. And I want to know why I should moderate my views. I have to just keep the right side of YouTube. The more extreme my views, the better. That forces my opponents to come and debate. He says, I totally agree with you. Well, why should I moderate my views then? So he's on about people are very good at making legal access going to law. I can't wait to get into the High Court. Can't wait. I know all the law myself. I can advocate myself. I don't need any lawyers. They'll be pumping up 20,000 a day and I'll wipe the floor in them. For they have never complied with Article 3.2 of the SCA directive. The whole thing is illegal. When they personally pay and when they're not paying, it doesn't matter. Now, so we leave that like that. Now, I don't really know what point he's making. I mean, how do you confront an entire society that's deluded, except for a few of my followers here? That's the question. A very good point is made by Lions T20. The amount of electricity wasted, and these local politicians lighting the whole countryside and upsetting the whole balance of nature by putting lights all over the place, everywhere, and then having them on that they don't go off. They can't even put a clock on them that would knock them off at 11 p.m. Who's going for a walk down in the park or anywhere else? They shouldn't be out that early in the morning or at night. However, I would agree with some street lighting, but it doesn't have to be to the extreme nature it is. And someday we may have to live in cities with no lights at all. So another man says here, the Chinese are laughing at us supplying this junk, and by God, that is true. Very important is Christopher Conlon, 74112. Sorry to correct your otherwise excellent podcast. I'm a semi-retired electrician. I have no doubt that's the case. That's the way people rarely ever retire completely. I just point out that the entire standard cooker would draw 7 kilowatts. My hand is up. I said when I played it back that a cooker would draw 7 kilowatts. I meant to say a ring of a cooker. A ring of a cooker pulls 1 kilowatt, 1,000 watts. Right? Now, I just want to explain to you. There's a watt. That's only like a candle or a butterfly's wing in power. And the reason it's not like temperature, they don't have a minus watt, because you'd have terrible trouble. You need to get a very small value for your watt for all practical purposes and then go from there up. And they multiply it by 1,000. It is really simple, really. So you have 1,000 watts as a kilowatt, and we call that a unit. And I love using the word unit because everybody understands it. But for the wholesale market and the generating of electricity, they use 1,000 units known as a megawatt. And I try to avoid any other term at all. So he's right on that. So when I talk about kilowatts, I'll try and use the word unit, and that's roughly a ring of a cooker, electric cooker. Now, in a way, I could plead my case in mitigation. I could say that some cookers have an oven with a big oven with a top ring and a bottom ring, and they have grills with a grill and an oven, a mini oven, and they have 4 rings on top. That might add up to 7, but I do yield to Christopher Conlon on that. You see, folks, if I make an error, do I destroy the whole video? I haven't time. That's the trouble. You make a slip of the tongue, and that happens. So, granted, point accepted there. Makes no difference to the overall thing. Now, the next thing I want to show you, the other thing I have to be careful is pressing the wrong button on the phone. You stop the whole thing. Here's AirGrid Smart Dashboard. The top line in red is the demand at the moment. It's about 5,000 megawatts. The blue line is wind generation, which is tiny. It's actually gone down to nearly nothing at the minute. And the yellow line is solar. Now, we don't know the capacity of solar. There's some, but it's given nothing. Now, at the moment. So that's the story there. The latest system demand is 5,000 megawatts. Okay, 5,000 megawatts. Generation is 3,533. Thermal is 60% of that, and they say renewables is 17.6%. How can it be 17.6% when there's no wind or solar at the minute? So there is something else in there. I think they put in those plants that burn the waste up in Drogheda and that as renewable. So it's not, it's another part of the lie. It's not wind and solar, it's some other type of burning that's going on that's classed as renewables. And it could be taken in wood from America, which is brought in here by diesel oil. And then there's an import at the moment of 22%, which is an awful lot. That's either nuclear, coal, oil or gas. You get this on EirGrid Smart Dashboard. Now I have to use my power of explanation for this. Liffey Meat said they have 6,640 solar panels, each with 0.7 of a unit, and that gives a total of 4,684. So 4,648. They advertise as 4.5. Those little differences don't matter to me. I don't nitpick on that. So if you divide that by 1,000, because that's kilowatts, you have 4.6 megawatts. That's fairly close. And they say the wind turbine is 3,000 megawatts, so that brings 7.6 megawatts, right? Or enough to power on the optimal wind and solar conditions about 7,648 rings of an electric cooker. That's in the optimum conditions, and that's not including the power used. If we figure out, I know what wind capacity is, the amount of actual capacity over a year, it's 18%. So that means that the capacity of that wind turbine is 540 units. 540 units. And the capacity of the solar farm, I don't know the exact. I've guessed it at 24%. It's not available anywhere. As time rolls on, we'll find out. So the capacity of that is 0.99 megawatts. Okay, so isn't that 999 rings of electric cooker or units? And that's a total of 153 megawatts, or 1,500 rings of an electric cooker when the wind and all would be going and the sun to maximum. Okay, the total thermal, the total fossil fuel generation in Ireland is 6,226. 6,226. That has not changed since I began checking it easily 20 years ago. They haven't reduced any thermal capacity at all. Now we'll have a wee look here at what that is. Now there's a post from Paul English, N21. I heard on radio that they would have to cover an area the size of Leinster. That's more than a quarter of Ireland, to meet our 2030 target, or else face a fine. That's why they need Activate to get as much people to put up solar to help them meet the target. Now, I'm not suggesting that solar on a roof of a house is useless. I'm not even looking into it. It will shave you and things like that in the morning. It will not heat your house. But I'm only taking issue when you feed it into the grid and force me to pay for it. Where you get your private solar farm and make me pay for it, and your private wind farm and make me pay for it. That's the issue I'm making. Now, there was another fella there said something about his photo LEDs, the things you buy in Lidl's, little things you stick down in the driveway, and they charge up in the daytime and they come on at night with lights. And that shows you the level of dim-wittedness in Ireland. And the money was spent on that for his education, and he's still talking nonsense. That's solar energy that's stored in little things. There wouldn't be any more than 4 or 5 watts. This is the ridiculous thing you have to put up with. I make it that there are 33 thermal power stations, but they include on them some that are using burning waste. So it doesn't really matter that much, but I've added up the total capacity is 6,226, and at the moment we're using of that only 3,555. It used to be Money Point was burning, the biggest power station in Ireland was burning 5,000 tons of coal a day. 5,000 tons of coal a day. I have that from a man who worked there. Now they have it here. Now they have it here that it's still burning coal. It says here all three generating banks are burning coal, but that heavy fuel oil is used as well, both. So those who say that they're not burning coal in Moneypoint, it doesn't say that here, but let's comment underneath. I won't tell you for sure, but there's no difference in emissions from heavy fuel oil and coal. And then you can get the list down there. There's a lot of them burning distillate oil, that's diesel. So now I want to explain to you what is what. You have base load power to keep the lights on all the time. It used to be 2,500 megawatts would do. Now it's 3,000 nearly with the data centers. You have that. Now, that's a big plant powered by coal or anything that can heat water. And it heats the water, and the water rises to a very high pressure, and it drives a steam turbine, and the water is condensed back using the water from the sea or the river or whatever. That's why they're usually built near water. They're not using the water out of the river as such. They're using it to cool and condense the water back, so the same clean water is recycled all the time. Have you that? And over in Lanesborough, there used to be great fishing where the hot water came out. All the fish used to assemble there on the Shannon. So you have that. Now, so that's condensing steam plant. It's about 56% efficient. That means that a good deal of the gases gets up through the sky and heats the moon. But it's still a very, very efficient system. The next system is the gas turbine, which can run on gas, diesel oil, paraffin oil, but not petrol. It can't run on heavy fuel oil. It's the same as a jet engine of an aircraft. It spins a central rotor, like this is a bottle, spins it round, and that's connected to a generator, and that drives the first phase, open cycle, the first cycle. It's not efficient, because most of the flue gases carry the heat to heat the moon again and heat the air. It's about 33% efficient. But it can come on in 15 minutes. And so they like these as fast-acting plant. Next, in some cases, they combine the flue gases going through into a boiler. If the boiler is as big as an ordinary Moneypoint boiler, then it takes the same length to heat up and cool down, 9 hours. If you do that too often, you'll crack the metal and destroy it. It's meant to run continuously. For that reason, we have a lot of open cycle gas turbines, just ordinary jet engines, but then we have some that have the combined cycle. And with the combined cycle, you can divert the flue gases out into the moon and heat the moon if you want to, or you can let it through and heat up your boiler. But you must give it enough time. If the boiler is half the size of Moneypoint, you can raise the steam, you can heat it up in 4.5 hours. If it's the full size of Moneypoint, it takes the full 9 hours. When you let the flue gases through the water, you boil the water in the secondary part, that's the second cycle, and you rise steam. And that steam might not be just as efficient as the condensing steam plant, but it's not too far off it. Could be around 48% efficient. So you have 48% efficiency plus 33%, we'd say, efficiency. It might be slightly less efficient because the first cycle has to give it steam. It's not just getting away as quick. It doesn't really matter. Add the 49% efficient to 33%, and I make that something like 77% efficient. And to make sure I make no mistakes, I have my trusty cut discount store calculator, 82% efficient. Now I have to tell you, it's not really that efficient. It's about 75% efficient. That's the most efficient plant there is. Condensing steam. The limitation of it is it will only run on gas. It will only run on diesel or paraffin fuel. It will not run on anything else. It won't run on heavy fuel oil, which the oil companies are trying to get rid of. They give you the fuel oil a lot cheaper, and that's the same oil that some ships run on. So when you have a condensing, a combined cycle turbine plant, you only run it on gas or distillate oil, diesel oil, distillate oil. Whereas if you have the old traditional condensing steam turbine like Moneypoint, it'll run on a whole heap of things: coal, oil, gas, and heavy fuel oil, which they give you cheap because it's not in as much demand and it's not as useful. You couldn't run a big haulage lorry or your car, your diesel car, on heavy fuel oil. It can't be done. There was an old engine long ago called a hot bulb engine which tried to do that and did do it to a certain extent. Okay, you have that. Now, the problem with those that boil water is it takes too long to heat them up. So when they brought in the wind energy, they moved over to fast-acting plant. Ryan's diesel engines, 11 million he gave for diesel engines that couldn't be got up the roads. 11 million. There's a whole lot of diesel engine plants all over the place. They're very inefficient because when the diesel is injected into the cylinder, it drives down the cylinder, the heat is dissipated into the cooling system and wasted. Used to be a lot of old baloney talk about combined heat, a load of horse manure. I don't think it's anywhere in Ireland, and it could have been put where you'd use the heat from generation to heat homes. And they had it at Lanesborough for 20 years, and not one home was ever heated, and the water being pumped into the Shannon. This will tell you the lunacy of the political parties. Anyway, we move on from that. Now you have the general view. Now, when you introduce renewable energy, those type of powers, I'm after telling you, are synchronous. They give stability to the grid, 50 hertz. If you introduce wind and solar or import it, that's all direct current. That has to be inverted through an inverter into alternating current, three-phase current. That can be done. And in fact, if I went out and bought, let's say, saw at an auction, a three-phase, let's say, bandsaw or a milling machine or something, you can buy an inverter that will convert it, not fully efficient, but fairly efficient, into single and run on the single phase supply. But if there's any peripheral appliances, you need one inverter. Is it VDF, I think you call it? You need one inverter, there's a name on it here, for each motor. Get me point? So it's just not as simple as it looks. It's maybe all right for a single motor appliance, but it can be done. The problem is it doesn't have the synchronicity of the grid. And because of that, you need at least 34 to 36% of fossil fuel, heavy rotor, a big rotor going around, and power in the grid. You cannot let it go below that, with the result that 65% is all the renewable energy you can let in. So as the Irish government continues to install, with the aid of Liffey Meats and all of them, more and more of this stuff, they're still confined that they need 35 roughly percent of the grid fossil fuel, not imported fossil fuel. So really you can only use 65%. And as we are currently, shows demand at the minute of, is that about 3,500 or something? It's very low at the minute, I can't understand that. That we already have 4,000 megawatts of wind energy, and we can only use a certain proportion. And as they put in more of these in Liffey Meats, and all the glowing reports, and Niamh Smith with her new hairdo, and as we do all of this, we very soon find that we can't use it, and therefore you have to pay them to turn it off. So I just Googled it here, and I see Ireland Energy, which is probably a vested interest, but still I'll tell you what to say. Overall payments for constraining off electricity supply from all plants on the All Ireland electricity market, not just wind, total 160 million in 2015, down from 180 million in 2014. Now here's a report on the United Kingdom, which is a much bigger grid than ours, and it says here, wind farm operators were recently paid more than £12 million in compensation by the UK government for turning off the turbines because the grid was at risk of being overloaded. Now there is the proof of what I'm saying. There is no doubt about this. Some people can't get it through their skulls, but that's the reality. They're paying them to turn them off. What are the reasons that have led to such high payments, and are current regulations justified? They'll give them all they have at the expense of the consumer. Around 20 minutes, not doing too bad, and I'll read you this article from Power Technology of the UK. Wind farm operators were recently paid more than 12 million in compensation by the UK government for turning off their turbines because the grid was at risk of being overloaded. So what are the reasons? They probably won't get this right. I'm one of the few people that have got this right. In the beginning of 2020, figures provided by the Renewable Energy Foundation, a charity organisation, showed that so-called constraint payments have reportedly totaled 650 million over the last decade as compensation to wind farm owners for discarding 8.7 terawatts of electricity. In some cases, wind farm operators have been paid more to switch off than to produce power. So a kilowatt is a unit. It's the ring of an electric cooker, or roughly what a kettle boiling would use. Next up is a megawatt, which is 1,000 kilowatts. Next up is a gigawatt, which is 1,000 megawatts. And next up is a terawatt, which is 1,000 gigawatts. It's one followed by 9 knots electric cookers. Now at this stage, I put such effort into this that I'll run this video even if something goes wrong. So that's the situation. 8.7 terawatts. So that's 8,700 followed by 6 knots. So it's 8.7, or 8 followed by the number I've said. I think I said 9. 8 followed by 9 knots, except it's 8.7. So it's 8,700 followed by 6 knots. It's a colossal figure. So that's the amount of compensation for owners of discarding it, throwing it away, right? In some cases, wind farm operators have been paid more to switch off than to produce power. So are you beginning to see why what Liffey Meets is doing is false? They may be going along with government policy and activate or doing public government policy. And maybe they're right to take whatever's going. But it's my duty to point out what the effect of that is. The establishment of constraint payments is part of the regulatory framework. Yeah, who carved up that? Called Connect and Manage. Connect and Manage. Try building a bicycle shed with your Connect and Manage. Introduced by the UK government in 2010, it has been put in place to allow the development of electricity generation projects and their connection to the transition grid. It's put in place to feather the nests of their friends and to push Ursula von der Leyen's stupid green energy net zero nonsense that is destroying Europe, that has forced Sir Keir Starmer to back down on the steel production and give them huge grants to compensate. For the last 2 years, the Irish government has been giving relief. They've been giving subsidies to bill payers. I got it myself. Amounted about £400 during the COVID thing. And for all this. And Colin McCarthy, the economist, said they would have NAMA, National Asset Management Agency, for windmills. So they're already subsidising them. But now the subsidy has stopped. So What's the situation now? Well, the point about Liffey Meats, they say it's behind the meter. I said that's a lie. It's not behind the meter. They generate all the bit they can. They use as much as what they can in the factory, and that certainly would cut back on the amount of power coming out from Cavan on the three-phase line, and technically that would feed back as less need for the plant in the power stations. But they can't turn off the traditional plant, the condensing steam plant, because you can't start it up and down all the time. It wastes the energy, start heating it up and turning it down, and it eventually breaks it and makes it very costly. Whitegate, that happened in Whitegate a few years back. So what they're doing is they're putting in fast-acting plant. They're cutting out the second cycle of the combined cycle gas turbine and letting the fumes up in the air without ever trapping the heat that's in them, reducing the efficiency from 75% approx to 33%, so that Liffey Meats can blow the trumpet on this stuff. So when the power is no sun or no wind, Liffey Meats are drawing the power from these inefficient plants, diesel engines and the like, whereas they should be drawing it from very efficient combined cycle and condensing steam plant. Like everything is not exact, there's varying amounts of this. So the consumer in Belgium stuff living down the street, or the restaurant there where I get my dinner and autumn, is paying for electricity, which is much higher cost. But it even gets worse than that. The effect on the environment is nil. They haven't shut down any of the plants. I'm after showing you, it's there on Wikipedia. They've shut down nothing. They've transferred them from the traditional old good old way of burning heavy oil to fast-acting plant burning diesel and gas. That's the reality. There's nothing great about this. You add the bit of solar. I've shown the total average yearly output of these things is only 1.53 megawatts. 1.53 megawatts. So, and there has to be 35% of traditional electricity coming through the wire. But the people of Belgium stuff are screwed. Now, I want to just finish this off because I don't want to get it too long. Now, when you add the conventional thermal power, 6,000 megawatts, there's already 4,000 of wind and growing. That's to rise to about 6 if they get their way. And we guess there's 1,000 solar already in the system, and they hope to increase that. That means there's 11,000 megawatts of generating capacity when you only need 6, and that means there's 5,000 too much. 5,000 too much. So, if you take a couple, the Robinsons or the Smiths or the Rileys or the Martins or the Gilhooleys, if you had no renewables, the cost of the bill would be say their bill is 1,000. If you had no renewables and they got a bill for 1,000 euros or pounds in England, there's 6,000 megawatts of generation in the normal system. That means a factor of 166 per megawatt. They're paying 166 per megawatt. Now we're paying 11. We're paying 5 renewables as well. 6 and 5 is 11. And when you multiply that by 11, you get 1,833. So the bill, instead of being 1,000, is 1,833. Right? That's the basic maths. Now, remember, because you have this excess capacity, you have to pay for the basic power. You have to have this power if there's no wind or no solar. Right? They've added on 5,000 of renewable energy, which can't be relied on and which is a very low output, and which can never exceed 65% of total requirements without a blackout. And so this other 5,000 has to be paid for. So instead of paying for 6,000 megawatts, you're paying for a total of 11,000. So somebody has to make sure that they keep going, right? So 11,000 is to be added to. In the 2010 adequacy report, they aimed for 15,000. That includes a lot of offshore wind and covering the whole place with solar panels. So when the amount of generation capacity is 15,000 and we only need 6, it stands to reason that you're going to be paying in your bill 6 divided by 15, and I make that 2.5 times. 6 into 15 is 2.5. I think that's right. 6 and 6 is 12 and 3 is 15. 2.5 times what you would pay if you had none. You're now paying 70 cents in Dublin in some places per unit. 2.5 times. And they have to be made profitable or they'll go bust. So you can take your current bill, which is on this, which is at about it's about at the moment about 11,000 watts, and you can add this extra. There's going to go another 6,000 megawatts. I meant to say megawatts, sorry, megawatts added to that. So I'm sure you get the general idea. This video is now getting a bit long, and we can probably leave it at that. So I couldn't understand, even with the extra money being charged to consumers, and the people of Ballagym stuff are in effect setting off a bit of the cost to Liffey Meats, because Liffey Meats can export the power out to the people of Ballagym stuff who pay for the highest fuel in the mix. So if there's coal, oil and gas and there's a ton of coal in the mix, they have to pay the highest price. So you have solar and wind energy, which is said to be renewable, paid for at the highest price of fossil fuel there is. And if there's a war and the ship starts sinking in the Red Sea, the people of Ballyduff are going to have to pay the price of the very expensive oil component in the generation. That's the extent of the scam. Now I have to say, Activate have to make a living. I'm not taking issue with them putting them on houses and that's different, provided they're not fed into the grid. But you can see how by feeding it back into the grid, Liffey Meats can socialise the cost of this. Now what I found then with the wind farms is they can never pay their capital costs. So what they do is they put in an accounting trick. They show a profit, but then if you divide what the spare cash they have left over by the lifetime of the wind farm, it can never pay back its capital cost. Some of them are 70 and 80 years to pay it back, and they only last 25. Now, in the case of national toll roads, there's an audited report in the account that the toll roads bails them out. In the case of SSE, they bail them out. In the case of the ESB, they handed 10 million to Derrybrine Wind Farm away back in 2018 because it couldn't even make its basic payments. A ridiculous monstrosity. Right? And then who's going to pull them down? So there is the reason why this is an outrageous scam. You can't use them on their own. You can only use them as a prop up to the solid fossil fuel generation or nuclear. You can't replace the 35% requirement with any other form, including imported energy, which is direct current. And so you have to pay to turn them off. You have a big millstone around your neck and you have to pay to turn them off. And this has been run in Britain, and I'm giving you the constraint payments. It's hard to get the actual figures here for Ireland, but they're pro rata, I'm sure, and you see in Europe the effects of this. The bills go through the roof. I did a video about 2 years ago, and I predict a bill in Ireland, a unit will cost 2.49 cents. We already have a huge arrears people simply can't pay. So will I leave it at that, folks? Now I invite all comments. If you post gibberish on something like this, I have to delete it, but keep it fairly. You can tell me I'm an idiot if I'm wrong or whatever. I challenge everybody to this, but they won't do it. I met 5 engineers from the Department of Energy and wiped the floor in them. They were unable to deal with it. They just said, we have the law behind us. The people vote for this. And look at Niamh Smith got a picture in the Celt. promoting a scam on the very people who went in and they voted for her. Oh, look at her hairdo. That's the kind of idiots. That's how you can fool people. And that's why I say pyramid selling schemes should not be punished. If people are that stupid, they deserve to be poor. That's the thing. And this is a simple pyramid selling scheme. It's just wound around a bit and duckied up a bit to make it fool a few people. But I think there's less and less people being fooled. I've obviously probably left something out. It's a good video, 35 minutes. I'm glad I got through that. I think I've explained that to you now, what the madness that's going on. It has left Europe with no defence. They wanted Trump to back them up with NATO. He's sick of them. Now they're trying to raise an army and raise arms. How are they going to, will the wind farms and the solar farms create arms? What if you had a weapons factory in Ireland producing tanks and big artillery? Would it be caught with these carbon taxes? And that's another thing. Liffey Meats will be able to claim target carbon rebates. Some other factory that closes up will be able to sell its carbon credits to Liffey Meats. What a kind of a scam is that? Will the factories making the weapons, will they have to put up wind farms and solar farms? No island runs on wind and solar. There's no example anywhere in the world. And can I just finish off on a little afterthought, a little postscript? Up the road in Wellman's International, 250 jobs are on the line. And one of the reasons quoted is high energy costs. They recycle plastic and stuff into some other product and they need electricity. And they said they can't pay the electricity bill anymore. So what is the point in Neve Smith TD boasting about Liffey Meats with their renewable energy when just across the ditch over a bit in Mulla the factory is closing down because of the very cost of the nonsense she and her cohorts are pronouncing? What happened or promoting? What happened? The Greens in Dublin, they got horsed out. But the Cavan people will vote for anything, as long as it's the traditional party. That's it. Now come on now and tell me I'm wrong. Great video. Thank you very much. Goodbye.